First thing to understand is that at the deepest level, you're perfect. Many people struggle with this lesson, and we have to appeal to your faith. So, if you happen to be a Christian or you subscribe to Islam or Judaism or whatever, the great thing about that is that there's plenty of teaching that says, in God's eyes, you are perfect. It's a difficult thing for us to grab, so therefore, what I'm going to suggest is that if you look at a newborn, then what most people's reaction is, oh, isn't it beautiful? But the baby itself is not actually beautiful because it's got no teeth, it's got no hair, it's probably crapping in that nappy. So, it's not what we say is beautiful. What we see is something beyond the physical body lying there in front of us. We see innocence and we see perfection and we see no damage yet and all of those sort of things. So we say that it's beautiful. The reason we say it's beautiful, and this is a profoundly deep concept, and I'm going to say it slowly so you get it. The reason we say the baby is beautiful is we're recognizing our own perfection. You can't actually see something that you don't see within yourself. So take your time with this. When you see something magnificent, whether that's the scenery out in nature, whether that's a beautiful piece of artwork, whether that's a magical looking human being, whether it's, a tree that just appeals to you, or, a sunset, it doesn't matter what it is. When you see something that is stunningly beautiful, you are recognizing yourself within that. Perhaps an illustration would help here. If we get someone from Mars, I know there's nobody on Mars, but if we got a Martian and brought them here and said, what is that? And we pointed to water, they'd have no idea because there's no water on Mars. Therefore, we can make that conclusion. You cannot recognize what you don't see within, that you don't have experience of already. Therefore, this part of you that is still there, this inner perfection that I'm talking about, needs to be recognized by us. Other people see it already. Other people look past our shortcomings and our faults and our misbehaviors and our misdeeds. There are people who are willing to let go of that stuff. It's just that we're not one of them. But if you did, what you would see is that at this internal level, you're perfect. If it came down to a score out of 10, it would be 10 out of 10. So what happens is that we start that way. When you get a 2-year-old and say to them, are you beautiful? Their answer is, of course. They actually don't consider any other possibility. Now, maybe I'm talking about an 18-month-old or a 2.5-year-old, but there's a period in our life where we recognise our own magnificence and we're the centre of the world, and the world does rotate around us, and it's a pretty magical time in life. As we start to merge with our community, those kind of things, what happens is we start to compare ourselves to others. And as we do the I'm too tall, I'm too short, I'm too fat, too skinny, not academic enough, not sporting enough, whatever the comparison is, what we see ourselves as is diminished or less than. So we develop an image of ourselves. Now, by definition, the words self and image are worth exploring. An image, if I showed you an image of a boat, that's not a boat, that's an image of a boat. So an image of yourself is by definition false. It is not real. It is concocted and it is made up. And the reason that I'm emphasizing that is that if the real you is perfect and the made up version of you is imperfect, that's good news. Because what it means is this imperfection is a fantasy. It's a deliberation, it's a concoction of ideas collected from all over the place, negative experiences. You don't need me to describe all of that. But when I see myself as less than perfect, then I don't give myself 10 out of 10. And so at the self-image level, we see ourselves as diminished or lacking or whatever it is. And so maybe we say I'm a 7 out of 10 or a 6 or a 5 or an 8 or some number, but it's just never 10. So when that 7 out of 10 really represents 3 that's missing. So I'm not going to give myself that extra 3 because I failed a maths test, or because my father belted me when it should have been my brother, or because, I couldn't run fastest in the foot race, or because of some bullshit thing that happened that I'm making important. Because who cares how fast you can run, and who cares how you do your maths, and who cares, that belting that I still recall that my brother should have got compares nothing. There's no way of comparing that to all the ones I didn't get that other kids in my family got that maybe I should have. So, I got off scot-free, but I'm twisting the facts. I'm twisting the circumstances by emphasizing one over all of the others. So I have this warped and distorted view of how things were, and we all do that. So this image that I have of myself, image means false. Self means focused here. So our self-image is of us wounded, of us being less than. If I'm judging myself as too short, well, everyone else can see that I'm too short as well. So I assume that they think I'm too short or too dumb or too much of a procrastinator or, not able to work stuff out, and they're going to judge me as well. And I hate that, because that judgment of them, I feel isolated, I feel alone, I feel banished, I feel like I'm not good enough to fit in within the group, whatever you made up at the time. And as a consequence of that, because I don't want that to happen, I'm going to put in place an act or a barrier or a facade which is designed to prevent people seeing that. So what we do is we put on this kind of persona. In fact, I call it personality. And its job is to stop other people perceiving our self-made up shortcomings and nailing them and mentioning them. And so there's the real me, which is perfect. There's the self-image, which is imperfect. And then there's my protective devices to make sure people don't see my imperfections, call them out, and have me banished. The end result of that is that I walk around portraying myself a certain way, hoping that you're going to buy that, hoping that you buy the story. Hoping desperately that you're going to buy the story, because my version of my story is so tragic that I wouldn't want you to be buying that. What that means is I've got a bunch of skeletons in the closet, all the things that I've said and done. We mentioned this yesterday. All the things that I've said and done that I wish I'd never said and done, they're being hidden so you don't see them, because that would, I assume, you'd reject me. So, and I don't want to feel that isolation, so that's all hidden. So I've got to put something out there. So I'm going to put out there whatever it is that I think is convincing to the rest of the world, except that I learnt that when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, and that's become so familiar that I think that that's me. And people talk about being an extrovert or an introvert as if that's actually how you're born, when in reality that's how we make ourselves, because a fairly simple assumption you can make is that an introvert figures you get through life with less scars and bruises by being introverted than you do if you be extroverted. But the extroverts figure you get through life with less scars and bruises if you're extroverted as opposed to introverted. Everyone is in fact wrong, but they're acting as if they're correct. Now the problem here is that if you look at it, perfect you, self-image, portrayal, personality, then the problem with that is that the personality and the self-image are so strong that they overpower perfection, and we tend to not notice. We tend to forget that inside, I'm a perfect human being. I'm one of God's children, mate. God said that, not me. I didn't figure that bit out. It's in all of the books. I'm one of God's children. When it comes to the pearly gates and getting into heaven, we're all forgiven because we're perfect, and God is going to recognize our perfection and ignore our sins. Now, various religions have twisted that, but generally speaking, what you know is if we go back to the newborn, there's perfection. So that is still within us. And the people who love us choose to see this perfection as opposed to keep this mental scoreboard we talked about yesterday. What we do is those judgments are about our character. In other words, we personalize the fact that I'm no good at maths, as if that actually mattered. We consider these things to be fundamental to our character. We consider ourselves to be fatally flawed. There is something actually wrong with me. Now, this is just bullshit on a massive scale, but it's been sold to us by us over and over so long. We're fond of blaming the people who started it, which is primarily parents and community and that, school teachers and that kind of thing. But the reality is the damage that they did to us is kind of infinitesimal compared to the damage we do to ourselves with that negative self-talk, because what we do is we make failure personal. And so when my project doesn't work, that's about me, when in fact it was actually only about the project. If you're a parent, you know this. You can love your child and be disgusted by their behaviour. The love for your child, the realisation of that child's perfection, has nothing to do with the fact they just robbed a bank. We need to extend that courtesy to ourselves. So yesterday's lesson about the mental scoreboard was to say, okay, if that's the way that you've got the balance, how about you redress that? where things have been massive failures in your life, you can turn them opposite. Instead of holding them against yourself and counting against your self-esteem and being negative in your life, the trick is to look at it and go, okay, where is the value in this lesson? It's our job to turn the negative experiences and the negative words from other people into value. So the real way to do that is to say to yourself, what's the lesson? What do I get out of this? Now that brings us to what we need to do for today. What is today's assignment? Well, to realize your perfection, what we have to do is work on our self-image. So really what I'm going to say is that when we break a promise to ourselves, the real reason you're involved in a 21-day habit change challenge is because what you want to do is you actually want something to stick. You know, the deepest desire is to be able to make something that you've tried many times before actually work this time. And congratulations for getting in it and for going at it at that level. It looks like I just need to eat less. It looks like I need to get to bed earlier. It looks like I need to stop alcohol, less food, stop smoking. Whatever you've got on your list, it looks like that. But the reality is that that's not what we want. That's what we turn up thinking that we want. What we want to do is we want to become the person who could pull that off. Our deepest desire is to earn our own self-respect. And the only way that I know to do that is to make promises to yourself and then keep them. Therefore, the promises that we make to ourselves need to be small enough to keep them. And so what that means is if I'm saying to myself I need to eat less, but it becomes difficult and I'm overcome by hunger, then I need to say, okay, how about I get through the next 5 minutes? Rule number one, it needs to be small enough so that it's easily repeatable tomorrow. And rule number two is, how do I build up the commitment? What I'm suggesting is, the more you challenge yourself to change your behavior, the more you're actually elevating self-esteem when you pull it off. My experience tells me that if you got this far, you can go further by promising yourself more. Remember, this is a promise just to you. Everyone else is still going to love you. You know, if you said you're not going to eat and then you do, the people who love you are not going to stop loving you because of that, but you will. So the damage is done by you to you. Probably time for you to step up. Self-image boils down to this: we're perfect. 10 out of 10, remember the baby. As we grow, we get an image of ourselves that by definition is false, and so we have a false version of ourselves that we repeat often enough to believe that that's the real one, and it covers over and makes like effectively non-existent the perfect internal real us that is there. Other people see it, but we don't, because we believe this self-image to be real, even though, as I said to you, it's a fantasy. That we give it 7 out of 10 or whatever the number is, where the real us is 10 out of 10. Then we develop a strategy called personality, designed to keep people at a distance so they won't hurt us by pointing out to us our shortcomings. When in actual fact, if we were good at that, we would seek to find out about our shortcomings so that we could fix them. Generally speaking, what happens is our shortcomings get pointed out to us with judgment. What we would dearly love is someone who cares about us enough to point out our shortcomings with compassion and not judgment. But because it was done with judgment in the beginning, we take it on board and we consider it's personal, and then we make all of this, you know, these faults of mine are fundamental, and there's something totally wrong with me, and I don't deserve to be here, and I certainly don't deserve to be successful, and we sell that story. And the problem is not the people who did that to you, but the people who set you on that path got you with it good enough so that you've continued to do the damage ever since. The reversal of that is, find another habit to add to your list of things you're going to change about yourself, because when you pull that off, you are going to increase your self-respect. The only way that I know to build self-esteem is to tackle the tough stuff. Been great talking to you. I admire and respect your efforts so far. Like I said, we're 2 days away from 2 weeks. Who would have thought that within 2 weeks we could be deeper than you've gone in a boot camp or in other places in your life? Congratulations. I hope you're loving this as much as I am. Go and check out the stuff we put in the units about the principles of life. You'll have to keep checking that because we're going to keep adding to it. Talk to you tomorrow.